Hello.
Everybody say hello to Hells in Bicheno. Hello, Bicheno. Hello, Shane Gould. And the people who run it. Yes. Thank you, Karen. Yes. It might be Emily. She was telling me today that she'd been trying to join in on the wine tastings and had discovered that where they live out near Apsley Gorge National Park, behind the new Apsley Gorge winery there, it's got very poor internet reception. So tonight she was planning to drive in her car and sit there and join in. So I'm not sure if Emily's sitting in her car down the road to get good reception, but certainly someone from Overtime there has connected with us. And Helen, Karen says, hope you're okay.
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. And thank you for asking. I'm coming to you from Melbourne. Sometimes sunny, sometimes cloudy Melbourne. And in fact, I'm coming to you from the Mornington Peninsula, around Balnarring specifically, but around the whole Red Hill wine region, which is
another very, very fine cool climate wine region.
That's right. There's three of the best cool climate wine regions are the Mornington Peninsula, the Yarra Valley, and the whole of Tasmania.
Absolutely. And actually, one of the wines we're doing tonight has been likened to some of the wines from the Mornington Peninsula. Hello, Priory Ridge. Lovely to see you on board.
Yeah. So I'm coming to you from my parents' house, and Dad loves his red wine, but he specifically loves Margaret River Merlot. So I thought that we might just test him out a little bit with these two Pinots that we're going to taste tonight. Yeah. So we might not ask him his opinion, because he might tell us about, well, nothing can match the WA stuff, but he might enjoy it anyway.
I think you'll see by the look on his face. Otherwise, he can give it the thumbs up. But who can not like an East Coast Pinot from around these parts?
That's
hey,
right.
Super Duff Man.
That's
all right. I think it's 5 o'clock and we've got quite a few people there. We don't want to bore you. We like things to be short and sharp. So, McLean Bay Wines have joined us. Hello. Lovely to see you.
I just saw her. I think it was Shane asked. She's making a pea and ham soup tomorrow, and she wants to know what wine will go with it. Well, it has to be a Pinot, because it goes with the ham. So I reckon let's see which one tonight we think goes best with it.
It does, yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to pour mine. I'm going to disappear from it. I'm going to pour our first wine, which is the Six Friends, for Dad, and go and give it to him. Okay.
Okay. Well, we've got a few new people tonight, so I'll just do a quick rundown on the East Coast wine region. I'm talking to you from Bicheno, which is in the heart of the region. There's quite a concentration of both vineyards and wineries between Swansea and Bicheno, but the whole region itself is the third largest in Tasmania, although we're only 1% behind Coal River in terms of production. So we might overtake them soon, because there's certainly more and more plantings happening on this coast. So the East Coast wine region starts down at Marion Bay. That's just before you get onto the Tasman Peninsula, where Port Arthur is, for those of you who know that as a landmark. It extends up the coast through Bicheno and past Freycinet National Park and Wineglass Bay, which is what we're near, right up to St Helens, which is mostly known as the Bay of Fires. Oh my goodness, Chef Massimo has joined us. I'll never forget having your sensational food back when you were Gourmet Traveller Young Chef of the Year at Mud. We follow you, and lovely to see you there. Thank you for joining us.
And we've also been looking at some of his isolation videos that he makes. He makes cooking in the kitchen with his little child. So that's been fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there. All right. So what we are doing with these virtual tastings is starting from the southern end of the wine region. So this is week 3. We've done Brim Creek in week 1. We've done Cape Bernier in week 2. And we're moving up the coast. If you can picture yourselves driving up back towards Sorell, and the turn off at Sorell goes to Hobart. But if you keep going straight ahead, you get to the east coast. Not very far past there, just a kilometre or 2, I think, although Helen's better with distances than I am. On the right-hand side is a really dominant Georgian building with a big palm tree next door. Now, I mention this because if you come from that direction, you can't miss it. If you come from where we are and head down, you can't see it. It's totally invisible. Anyway, this property is called Burnside. And we're trying from Burnside, the 6 Friends Bicheno. My apologies for the brand being back to front, but if you'd like to see it better, just pop onto our shop. We're still working out the technology. We tried to do something smart last week and it was just too disorienting. And anyway,
it looks very Gaelic actually when it's back to front.
It does look a bit Gaelic. Hi, Rhonda and Paul. So the story behind this wine is that there were 3 guys at boarding school. They met there, they grew up, they got themselves partners and wives, which made 6 friends. These 6 friends had a lot of dinner parties, and I'm led to believe they had generous amounts of red wine. One night, one such night, Ian, who is reportedly full of it, said, look, we can do anything. Tim, you've got the dirt. Dave, you're a doctor now. You've got the money. Let's plant some vines. We'll plant enough so that we can trade half of the grapes for the winemaking fee, and each couple can have 1 bottle of wine every day of the year. So I think they planted in 2009. First vintage was 13. Immediately they went to, one of the best and had Alan Rousseau from Frogmore Creek come on board, and he still makes their wines. But they flew under the radar. They were really interested in wine to drink themselves until one of them worked out that the maths wasn't quite right and they really would need to sell some. So they got this funky label. It's funky back to front. It's funky right way around. It's just funky. And they started labeling them and laid them down and let them age because they thought that's a good thing to do with wine. Anyway, last year, young Tim with the dirt grabbed some 14, 15 and 16 vintages, entered them in the Tasmanian Wine Show, took out a bronze, a silver and a gold medal in that order, and also a trophy for Pinot Producer of the Year. So in January this year, they did the same thing again, popped the wines in there, added some more recent vintages and got the same sort of accolades. So they produce 200 dozen a year. It's not a big vineyard. Both of the vineyards that we have tonight only do Pinot Noir and aren't huge. They're 6 friends have planted 1 hectare. So they get about 25 tonne of fruit and 200 dozen bottles of wine out of it. Just a little aside, for those that were with us last week, just, I don't know, take a sip of wine or something.
Okay.
An interesting thing we talked about last week was that people often comment that Tasmanian wines are a bit more expensive. And we often explain to people that some of them are quite small. But Fred Peacock also explained to me that you have to add in the fact that the yield per hectare is about half or less than half. In some reading I've done lately, it's been like a quarter or a fifth of what they get on the mainland. So you've got to grow twice as much at least to get the same amount of wine. We're also a cool climate winery, wine region, so you've got to grow it for twice as long. That means you've got to tend it and keep the bugs at bay and fight off any diseases for twice as long. Then you throw in the terrain, because very little is flat in Tasmania, and there's very little that's done by machine. So then you add in the labour, because it's all done by hand predominantly. So this all adds to the price of the wine. However, I've read that this wine is comparable to one that is usually 3 times the price. Our friend Michelle up the Pinot shop says it's gorgeously scented. It's got vibrant notes, dark raspberry, but also chocolate and black cherry, which I particularly like. It's inviting indeed. Fruit's juicy and lively in the mouth, but it's got some grunt too. And that's what I like about this one too. We're going to meet some light Pinots later on, but at the moment we've got one here with a nice bit of grunt. Yeah, and it's also got a bit of a salty licorice taste.
Oh, I don't get the salty licorice taste.
I don't mind a bit of that myself. On the finish, that is. So it's got softly dry tannins, tremendous price for such an excellent wine. I think it's time we had a sip and see what we think of it, because it's been a while since we've tried this one.
And what are you having it with, Subi? Because I'll tell you what I'm having mine with, because I'm a little bit out of my place. So I found these.
Ah, you love them.
And I found these.
Oh, fantastic.
And
well,
I haven't finished. I found some groovy biscuits.
Fantastic.
And some cheese.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, I'm in Bicheno, a small country town, and you're in Melbourne. So I bought a triple olive dip, which I'm going into.
Lucky you.
Oh, Priory Ridge says, keep up the banter, Helen. So, and I've got a little bit of prosciutto. But let's have a taste of this one, hey?
Oh, okay. I've been tasting it already.
Hey, Jennifer Ford. Now the other thing
it's not hugely bodied, but it's actually got a lot of flavour in there. Like
it's got a lot happening.
Complex.
Federation Chocolate have just joined, and I reckon this one would be fantastic with some good chocolate from Federation.
Yeah. But you say that about all wines.
Well, I do. Rhonda has just commented that the cheese is in plastic, Helen. Yay!
Yeah. And Vegemite shapes. That's right.
What this all goes to show is that you don't have to be sophisticated to enjoy wine. It's really about matching your palate and your pocket. And
are you making a judgment?
Matter...
Are you making a judgment about my cheese in plastic?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I'm saying you don't have to be technically proficient. You just have to know what you like.
That's right.
I do like that.
Right.
Now, last week, I think I told a little story about Ross Wilson. Not Ross Wilson.
He was a singer.
Yes, Eagle Rock and all of that.
Right.
Ross Brown said, if you have if you have lamb. You've got to have Pinot. But if you have Pinot,
that's right. If you have Pinot, you don't have to have lamb.
You do not. In fact,
so
some Pinots go...
That means you can drink Pinot any time.
With anything.
When you have lamb, you have to drink Pinot.
You have to have Pinot. Absolutely, that's true. So some Pinots go really beautifully with seafood. So don't feel that because you're having a Pinot, you've got to have lamb or you've got to have red meat. You can have it with anything you like.
Yeah. Cornflakes.
What is happening over there in Melbourne, Helen?
Let's go on to talking about the next wine.
Yeah, I think the last little thing to say about that one is that it's pressed and fermented, and then it's oaked for 8 to 9 months, and then it's left to age. They think, like a good cheese, the wine gets better with age. And as we do.
Just before we go on to the next wine, which is the Overtime, you just mentioned something about oaking, but you told me something today about what I interpreted as wine perfume. So tell us about the wine perfume.
Well, I was having a little chat with Emily from Overtime today, because there are no tourists around. So I've got a bit of time to chat to people, which is really, really lovely. And she's a local, so she popped into the post office and sat down and we had a chat. And I said, look, we're doing you tonight. Is there anything to update me? And she gave me some really interesting information. And she said, we learn something every day working on wine. And I learn something every time I talk to someone who knows much more than me. So she was saying, you know, over time, very committed to wild yeast, unfiltered. And then she said, everything you taste in the bottle is from the fruit and the barrel. And I said, well, what else would there be? And she said, there are no added aromas. I said, pardon? People add aromas? And she said, yes, there's an oak aroma. So this one has none of that. It's just pure fruit, very fruit driven, made by young Jacob. But I'll tell you the little story. We'll go back a step. So for this one, you've got to imagine Pauline and Nick, a young couple, recently married, travelling around Tasmania on their honeymoon. They get to Bicheno, they see the bay. Thank you, Helen. And Nick turns to Pauline and says, I'm going to live here one day. So 20 years later, they come back and they find themselves a property in Harvey's Farm Road. Now, Nick, by this stage, was on his sort of third continent and third career. And he had been a farmer in New Zealand and other things. Oak aroma sounds like a song coming on.
I love it. We
Love
can do a little stage performance on that.
Oak aroma. I might start
Thanks,
wearing
Rhonda.
it. Bugger this French perfume. I think I'll get myself some oak aroma. Anyway.
Hiya, Alex.
Anyway, so at this point in time, he's working as a miner on the west coast of Tasmania. And in order to buy this 20 acres in 1986, he has to work really, really, really hard. And he does a lot of overtime, which is what paid for the vineyard. And
if you can read that backwards.
Emily said it still actually rings true because her and Jacob, her partner, both have a full-time job at Apsley Gorge Vineyard and Winery, and Pauline, mum and wife of Nick, also works. So this whole vineyard, which produces in a good year 69 dozen bottles, is all run on overtime when they're outside of their usual jobs. So this is one of the vineyards where, and actually Six Friends is too, where friends and relatives get together one day of the year and they pick, and that's where it all starts. So shall we have a taste of this one? Now,
oh, I better pour it. Hold on.
Once Nick had paid for the farm, perhaps, the 20 acres, he got himself a job with Brian Franklin at Apsley Gorge Vineyard. Now, this is relevant. He worked for him for the next 20 years. And it's relevant because Brian is totally dedicated to a French style of winemaking and goes there every year. So, the Six Friends has a bit of a French influence. Alain Rousseau is also got a bit of that Burgundy touch. He calls it.
Elaine calls the Six Friends in a Burgundy fashion, and Brian calls the overtime in a Burgundian fashion as well.
Yes, exactly. So Nick worked for Brian for 20 years, and during that time he hatched his own dream to plant. He wanted to plant 1,000 vines, and he wanted to make wine just to prove that he could. Well, in 20 years after 86, in about 2007, he planted 750 vines because that's all he could afford. All he could afford and all they could fit at that stage. So that's why there are still 750 vines, not 1,000. And they've been producing, this is the 8th vintage in 2020. It's recently been pressed and it's in oak at the Apsley Gorge Winery. But during those 8 years, we all know that farming's kind of on and off, and there are good years and bad years and that sort of thing. Well, there have been 2 years, 2015 and 2018, where no wine was made at all. They weren't satisfied with the quality of the grapes. So out of the eight years, they've got 6 vintages. Now, Nick made the first couple, and then unfortunately he died. Jacob came out of the Navy. He's also a qualified winemaker. He took over the making, and he also got himself a job with Brian Franklin. It's a bit of a family affair. So there's a very strong connection there. In 3 years ago, 2017, Jacob had come back, but he hadn't started working with Apsley Gorge yet. He was working at Devil's Corner, just down the road, in the vines, and there he met a gorgeous Belgian woman called Emily Bozat. And Emily and Jacob and Pauline are Overtime wines. So I said to Brian the other day, so is it because the vines are mature now? There just seems to have been a real change in the wine from the first 2 vintages, which Nick made, and then Jacob kicked in. And Brian said, well, Nick was trained by someone else. Be careful, yes. Nick was trained by someone else, and that's fine. It was actually Jeff Bull, who's a bit of a legend in the wine industry and the man behind Freycinet Vineyard, and fantastic wines. Absolutely, no problem there. Brian's got a bit of a different approach with his commitment to France. He's also committed to using natural yeast and making in that very Burgundian fashion. He said, with a twinkle in his eye, he said, Jacob's using natural yeasts. And so he's making this wine under Brian's watchful eye. Emily also, Jacob is known as winemaker and vineyard manager at Apsley Gorge, but Emily explained that when it comes to Apsley Gorge, Brian has right of veto. When it comes to Overtime, that's made in the same winery, and there's a bit of looking over the shoulder and that sort of thing, Jacob has right of veto. So let's give his latest effort a taste.
Absolutely, and thank you, Jacob and Emily. And they're about to provide Overtime with the next generation in another couple of months' time. So congratulations.
Third generation winemaker.
That's right. Yeah. Congratulations, Jacob and Emily, and we look forward to meeting the next generation.
So it's another one of the small vineyards that the people are really passionate, work really hard, and they've got a real vision for the future. They've got a dream of expanding the plantings, and but yeah, it just keeps giving, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it's lovely. It's lovely in the mouth. It's actually really smooth. It's smoother than what I remember, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. Well, Emily also said the 17, which is what we're drinking, really improved in the bottle.
Yeah.
Just from sitting for that time. So yeah, they're pretty excited about the 19, which they're going to be bottling in June.
Yeah. So, right. Okay.
One to watch. I think I'm going to have a bit of my smelly blue cheese with this one.
Go for it, Subi. Listen, we're getting up to, or we're over our time now, but we didn't really start our little beginning here with introducing who we are and who the farm shed is.
Oh, good point.
So what we'll do is we might sign off with doing that. So we might just sign off with thank you for joining us for our 3rd virtual wine tasting. It's Subi Mead in Bicheno, Helen Bain usually in Bicheno, but sitting in Melbourne just for a little time. I will be back, Subi. I am coming back.
Good.
I'm not quite sure when. And mind you, I have to self-isolate when I come back, so I'm not sure about. I don't know where you're going.
Well, we'll work that out when the time comes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And we are the Farm Shed East Coast Wine Centre in Bicheno. We showcase the wines from the 22 vineyards up and down the east coast, from north at St Helens down to
Marion Bay,
Creek, Marion Bay down south. So
actually, that southern point overlooks where in 1642 the first Europeans landed in Tasmania.
Yeah. So we're at the moment we aren't open for actual wine tastings. We are open for retail sales, so we still have art and design gallery. We've got wine for sale. We just can't do any tastings, but hopefully very soon, in the next,
can't wait.
Yeah, don't know when, but in the next month or so, we may be able to start to reopen. We need to get all our COVID safe safety forms done and our plans in place. And once we've done that, those enigmatic tasting machines that we've got are going to be pumping.
Absolutely. And I just have a couple of little things to add. Priory Ridge said, watch out for Priory Ridge, because that's the third one in this trio of the Burgundy style. This one's made at Apsley Gorge. Brian makes Apsley Gorge wine. Brian also makes the Priory Ridge Pinot. So we've got that one coming up a little bit later. And the other little bit of information for you, just because I think it's interesting, is that someone brought a bottle of this to us and said, I've got a friend that makes some wine. And we said, well, are they in the East Coast wine region? And they said, well, this is where they are. They're at Burnside. And I consulted with Fred Peacock, and he confirmed the highway there is the boundary. So it's about 250 metres in the East Coast wine region on the boundary with Coal River. Got some friends across the road that are trying to convince us to extend the boundary that way, as is young Mr. Dunbabin down at Bangor Shed. And my bit of inside knowledge is, so we got the wine, we said, yes, we're interested. We went and met the people, and guess what? It's another Dunbabin. We have one brother at Milton who grows grapes and has wine. It's one of our East Coast wine brands. We've got another brother at Mayfield who grows grapes but sells them, because a lot of people do that. They don't necessarily grow grapes for themselves. It's a cash crop, and a lot of our
merino wool lamps.
Yeah, a lot of our grapes go off to the mainland for sparkling wines. And this is the middle brother. The middle brother of the Dunbabins.
I've heard that there's actually a fourth brother, but I need someone out there in internet world and Tasmanian world to let us know who the fourth brother is, because someone told me a little while ago that there is a fourth brother. Well,
and then there are cousins. So you need a
there's many cousins.
Tree.
No, there's many cousins, and then there's many different strands of the Dunbabins.
Anyway, we always say that these tastings will be. Oh, Alex Paul, you're thirsty.
Alex, better get yourself
some water, man.
Put that beer down, Alex.
Okay, we always say that these are about 15 minutes, and we've gone to 25. We've had a lot of fun. We thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you when you can get to the farm shed. But meanwhile, we'll keep doing this, keep enjoying East Coast wines, keep introducing you to the 22 producers in the East Coast wine region.
See you next Thursday at 5 p.m.
Yeah. Check out our shop online if you want to check out any of these wines. Bye for now.
Bye for now.